I do not have kids. Let's say I did have a child magically right now, and I live in the great state of, I don't know, Washington. Let's say Washington because it's just down south of me. Who when I'm based in Vancouver here in Canada. What if I wanted? If I guess if I had a child who had symptoms of an issue, do they automatically get whole genome sequencing if I request it or the doctor requests it, Trish? Or how does that process start and how does it go kind of move along?
Yeah, I'll just give kind of a generic answer that isn't necessarily, um, Washington specific, but across the United States, when an individual has health insurance, whether it is through Medicaid or a commercial payer, for a test like whole exome or whole genome sequencing, because it's expensive and it's designed for people with specific clinical symptoms, a prior authorization process is required. And so your physician has to order it. That is a requirement in all states but Arizona, that a doctor order a laboratory test. And so the physician has to request it. And the prior authorization has to come in before we run the test or before we file the claim for the test. And you send over to that health insurance company. They have a process by which you provide information and say, here is the test that we want. In the United States, we use CPT code or common procedural codes, they're called, that describe what clinical service is being done. So you submit that code along with the required information. And most payers have a policy around whole exome and genome sequencing that it is covered if the individual was born with multiple birth defects, or there's one major birth defect of one organ system, there's proof of developmental delay or intellectual disability, there's proof of developmental regression, there's a family history that is suggestive of a problem, there's on childhood onset of epilepsy. I'm not listing all of the potential criteria, but you have to meet some of the items on that checklist in order for the health insurance company to cover it.
And who fills in the prior authorization? Is it the doctor or the, I guess, the parents of the child?
It is a clinician. And so the preference is that the clinician that ordered the test provide that information and actually fill out the form. That's difficult for clinicians to fit in their workflow, however. And, orthopedic folks, for example, that are ordering MRIs a lot, they're more accustomed to prior authorization. Laboratory testing prior authorization is less common outside of genetics, and so it doesn't fit in their workflow really well. So typically, they're sending us the medical records anyway. So we're allowed, as a laboratory, we fill out the check boxes on the form and provide all of the medical records on behalf of the family and the ordering clinician to the insurance company. In some cases, they prefer that we don't do that. They want to hear directly from the doctor, but we help facilitate that to make sure that the doctor knows how to do it. We help their staff. So we make sure that the information gets in a timely way.
And how long does that process roughly take on average from author, sort of, the symptoms of the child in the hospital towards actually getting whole genome sequencing, this entire prior authorization process within that? Like, how long does that roughly take?
Well, let's break it down into two different types of populations. You mentioned hospital, so I'm going to go right to inpatient with rapid whole genome sequencing in the NICU. Usually, hospital billing is a little bit different than it is for outpatient insurance, and there is an informing of the insurance company that there's a baby in the NICU, but nobody's sitting around waiting for prior authorization. This is an urgent situation. This baby needs to be tested now. So, yes, there can be paperwork on the back end, but the focus at that moment is ensuring that that child who needs it urgently gets the results as quickly as possible. In an outpatient setting, it's a little bit different. And again, it's highly variable by what type of insurance the person has and what the rules are. But generally, most health insurance companies try to turn it around in a few days. By the time all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, it's less than a week.
Actually, that's much faster than I would have thought. Actually, so you
Well,
think you hear horror stories, but that actually
yeah,
seems relatively quick.
that's
Actually,
the average. Some of them can be longer, like 2 weeks, and some of them are quick. And there are some payers that don't require a prior authorization at all. They just do a claim review on the back end to make sure the criteria is met. So it's a patchwork quilt. There's no one size fits all.